I think I got the best out of those visits because he was absolutely wonderful with children, children and animals. And myself and the other children who were there, and there were always a whole bunch of kids in the house, we were allowed to go any place and do anything and look at things. There were piles of wonderful ethnographic objects and beautiful ceramics that he'd just finished and so on. We were allowed to go and pick them up and play with them and do that kind of stuff. And if the grown-ups touched them, that was very bad.
But the children were allowed to do anything.
We could do it.
So he practiced what he preached, his primitivism.
Very much so. And the inclusivity of it.
Yeah, interesting. Now, you also say that your mother had an affair with Picasso.
Oh, indeed.
And with your father's support, I don't know if that's quite the word, understanding. How is that?
If not encouragement.
So it was truly a free environment among them.
They firmly believed in sexual freedom in this way, and they believed that by being free in that way, it did not influence the way you loved somebody. You know, love and sex were disconnected for them. You could go to bed with who you liked, but you still remained faithful to the person that you loved in a loving way.
And you do believe that they practiced that?
They certainly practiced it.
Whether they felt it?
Well, a few of them got tripped up by it, but they did make it stick in a genuine sort of way. It's not something that I could aspire to, but it suited them. Yeah. And you see, their whole idea of life was to not be bound by convention, and that was very important to them. They didn't want to be dictated to by church or state or anybody else. That was important.
Did you imbibe this growing up? Did you feel it? Did you understand it? Did you feel uneasy with it? As a child growing up in this environment, how did it strike you?
It seemed perfectly normal.
Okay.
I mean, as far as my own behavior and my own choices in life, the most important thing that they really inculcated into me was the need for me to make my own choices. You know, it's kind of like, it's no good copying me. You go off and find your own way.
That sounds like an ideal parenting.
I think it was very enlightened.
Yeah.
You know.
Very ahead of its time again.
Yeah.
But yet you have said that you didn't really know your mother. I don't know whether this is true of your father, that you felt you came to know her through her photographs.
Well, I did, yes. I mean, I knew my father much better because even in those days when it wasn't fashionable to be a hands-on dad, he certainly was. In a much more intimate way. I mean, he was hopeless at being a daddy, but he was a very good companion, and we did things together. But with Lee, you see, for the first 20 years of her life when I was around, the first 20 years of my life, she was an alcoholic and a depressive. And this was a direct result of the traumas that she had experienced during the war.
Could you tell us a little bit about that, the traumas that she experienced? You're talking about the things she saw that she photographed
at the
end of World War II, the camps in particular.
Well, you see, the minute she arrived in Paris, the war became very personal to her because a great many of her friends were missing. Lots of her Jewish friends had gone, but also other people who were artists or painters or poets or writers or journalists or printers even had gone. Max Jacob, the poet, they'd murdered him. Robert Desnos, the same thing. And she didn't know where these people had gone. Nobody knew. The idea was they would all be found in some huge work camp and repatriated, and that would be fine. But as she got further across Germany and kept on discovering more of these concentration camps, she realized that that was a futile hope, and most of her friends would not be coming home. And when she was going around, particularly Dachau, you can see from her photographs she was looking straight into the faces of the dead people to see if any of them were her missing friends. That's a trauma. And there wasn't any help for people like her. There were literally thousands suffering from what we would call post-traumatic stress.
And she was a sensitive woman. I mean,
deeply sensitive.
And had gone through trauma at an earlier stage.
Well, all these things compound. And I think she dealt with her childhood trauma extremely well, but it came back and bit her with a vengeance when all the wartime traumas were heaped on it.
So during your childhood and adolescence, you say she was an alcoholic.
Indeed, yes, she was. Yes,
and how did that matter? I mean, depressive too.
Oh yeah.
How did she withdraw?
Well, the thing about alcoholics is that they are very changeable. They have total personality changes from one minute to the next. And that was the same with her. And she could be really good company. And then she'd have one drink too many, and bang, she would be, you know, either weeping uncontrollably, being extremely aggressive or embarrassing, or something like that. She was never violent. Yeah. Ever.
And your father dealt with this?
Yes, he did. He coped with it in the most remarkable way, because he wasn't a kind of person that had any sort of scientific understanding about what she was suffering, but he was very intuitive, and he was, I think he never stopped loving her, although it was not always self-evident.
Well, you have written a play about her called The Angel and the Fiend.
Yes.
Does that deal with this aspect of her?
Well, it does. Yeah. When she was quite young, she wrote one of the very few diary entries that she made it reads, "I was terribly, terribly pretty. I looked like an angel, but I was a fiend inside."
So did you ever know her sober? I mean, at the end of her life, did you have a relationship with her?
Well, of course, there were moments when she was sober and quite cogent too. But by that time, she and I had developed quite a hostility towards each other, as one does, because, you know, it was a very difficult and fraught and unsatisfactory parent-child relationship, and we ended up fighting. We elevated the normal teenage parent spats into an art form.
And did your father serve as the mediator, as he had often been?
No, he didn't. He used to run for cover.
Okay.
But what I had in my life was an absolutely wonderful woman called Patsy Murray, and she came as my nanny when I was about 4. And she died actually February last year. By that time she'd been in my life for 57 years and 3 days, and she'd become the grandmother to my daughters and the great-grandmother to their children.
Interesting. You know. Now, the Farley Farmhouse, is it open to the public for tours?
Yes, it is
because
open.
You keep it, you are in charge of it. Tell us about what we would see if we were to visit there.
We've tried to keep the house as much as it was in my parents' day. Of course, the really fantastic key pictures painted by people like Picasso and Ernst, they're now in museums. But we've filled the walls with works by Roland and Lee, and also many works by their close associates. And so the house is like a work of art in itself. And if you visit it and interrogate it, you come away, I think, with a very good impression of what their lives had been about and what they had achieved.
It's interesting how there is this, I guess, British tradition of turning the house, and I think of Bloomsbury, and turning the house into a work of art. The idea of the home being both comfortable and beautiful. And it sounds to me like this house is in that extension. Now, did you raise your family there?
No. When I got married, I was lucky enough to move into another house, a lovely house on the same farm, like about 10 minutes walk away. And that became my home. And I'm delighted that I actually don't live in the family home, because that's a place of work now. And when it's not being visited by people, we're working constantly. There's 12 of us, and we're always working on the next book, or the next exhibition, or the next television documentary. And we're absolutely going like crazy.
So these exhibitions and these books deal with both your parents and the circle.
Absolutely, yes.
Because they had this network of people. That's really interesting.
Yes, we've contributed to some important exhibitions by Ernst and Miro and Picasso. We did a beautiful exhibition with the Musée Picasso in Barcelona, which was extremely popular, and that was Lee's photographs of Picasso and Picasso's paintings of Lee. It was a wonderful combination.
How many paintings did he do?
He painted her 6 times, and my father once.
It's funny, I just will give you my impression. When I look at the photographs of your parents, your father looks very contemplative. He looks almost a little lost or wan. I wonder if I'm projecting here. She seems much more central.
If you had met him, you would have found him a slightly dreamy, very kind of, Contemplative is a good word, because although he was here, his mind was very often, working on something in its own way.
Well, he was a writer as well as an artist.
Very much so, yes.
And so I guess he was comfortable with language.
He was very good with language. The interesting thing is he was highly dyslexic. And when I look at his manuscripts and so on, they're all the mistakes that dyslexic people make. And his writing, I think, stemmed very much from his conversation. So he wrote like he would talk, and that was in a friendly and accessible way. And I think that was why his book on Picasso was so successful, because it's the kind of book that you can really enjoy reading, and you don't have to struggle with obscure prose.
You feel the intimacy that the author felt for the subject.
He's very restrained, because he doesn't give any intimate details about Picasso's life, but he certainly allows us to have like a conversation with him.
Interesting. Well, it is interesting that you have devoted your life in many ways to your parents' work. And I wonder, on the one hand, you are the ideal person to do that, being their child. But on the other hand, it must be odd sometimes, especially, as you say, you have this kind of tumultuous relationship with your mother. Do you feel that you've sort of you've been able to negotiate an ideal relationship with your parents by being able to go over their work, write about them, distance yourself from them in a way in your work? Because I think it's something perhaps we all would love to do, but we don't have the material from our parents to be able to do that.
There's a good crack that goes, it's never too late to have a happy childhood.
And I've heard the opposite, actually. It's never too late to have an unhappy child.
See, well, for me, I'll take the first one.
Okay.
Because, you see, I didn't know Lee during her life, and then we became so embittered, but I found her through her work. I found her through studying her work. And the reason that I wanted to study her work was because it was so completely different. It represented a person so completely different to the one that I knew. And it's a way that she has left me this wonderful present, which every day gets more exciting, and I go off to all kinds of different places in the world and meet wonderful people and come here. And, it's her gift to me.
That's wonderful.
And it's a fantastic thing to be doing.
That's wonderful.
I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing.
Well, it's very inspiring to talk to you. I want to thank you so much for coming today, and I really encourage our viewers to look at the work of both your parents, which are available through so many books that you've edited and put together. Thanks a lot, Antony.
Thank you very much,
Penrose.
Paula.
And thank you for joining us today at the Drexel interview.